Hi everyone, so today we're going to be diving into GPT-5, OpenAI's newest, smartest, fastest model yet. I'll walk you through its top features and let's get to see GPT-5 in action. Let's get started. So the first feature you see here is that GPT-5 is now a unified system. What that means is that GPT-5 essentially has two models in one. So you've got your fast model, right? And then a deeper reasoning model, as you can see here, for harder problems. It's all connected through a real-time router which can instantly decide which mode to use based on the complexity of your prompt. So for example, if I give it a reasoning prompt, for example, I expect it to go into the thinking mode, which it does. As you can see, thinking longer for a better answer. You can also explicitly state it, but as you can see, it identifies it as a reasoning problem. Now I'm going to get a quick answer in the interest of time, and also because this is a very simpler problem. And you can see it responds pretty nicely. It lists out the steps and we get our final answer. Now let's try something a little different. So now let me ask it to write a 200-word short story about a time-traveling cat. And see, it switches pretty nicely. It understands that this is not... So it switches modes pretty nicely, and at the end it also says, if you want, I can also give you also give the story a mysterious twist ending. So it understands, right? So the router is continuously trained on real signals, including when user switch models, preference rates, etc. Now, also, coding is another strong suit of GPT-5. It shows particular improvements in complex front-end generation and debugging large repositories. So GPT-5's vibe coding generates clean working front-end UIs, games and apps, with better design sense, spacing and typography. So instead of actually going for the demo here, we can see the prompts that they've given here. So they've given, from a single prompt, GPT-5 has been able to generate these single HTML file games of sorts. So for example, I'm playing the game in front of you here. So yeah, and they've got pixel art, typing games, and all of those things, and it's all done using a single prompt. As you can see, a defined prompt, but a single prompt regardless, and it's doing a pretty well job, right? Pretty good job. The other thing is creative expression and writing. So they've actually given an example of this down here. So if I go to poetry, and so they've compared the responses that GPT-4o has given with GPT-5 on the same, write a short poem that makes an emotional impact. And what they found was GPT-5's response lands a larger emotional arc, right, with a stronger ending. And whereas clear imagery, striking metaphors, whereas GPT-4 is a little bit more predictable and telling instead of showing, right? So they've identified how GPT-5 is a little bit more better in terms of understanding the nuances in the language, that the stories or languages and the structures that are followed normally when you write poetry. But there are more examples here. So understanding cancer risk, querento, so it's able to be a little bit more empathetic, and it's able to understand a lot more in terms of the context and everything, and draft its responses based on that. So here they've actually done all their evaluations, and we see it's much more smarter across the board. And yeah, so there's also a GPT-5 Pro version where it's an extended reasoning. So if I click here, you can see you've got your GPT-5, GPT-5 Thinking, and GPT-5 Pro, where it's research grade intelligence, right? So that is another thing. Okay, so now we're going to talk about hallucinations, right? GPT-5 is significantly less likely to hallucinate than their previous models. 45% less likely to contain a factual error than GPT-4o, and 80% less likely to contain a factual error than OpenAI o3. And they've actually tested this out here. We can test it out here as well. I have a prompt. But as you can see here, consider the following chart, and it asks a couple of questions, and GPT-o3 does give some answer even though there is no chart, whereas GPT-5 automatically states, I can't see the charts you're referring to. For example, here, if I ask it the population of a planet Xeronia, which doesn't exist. I'm not aware. So it automatically says, I don't know. And the other thing they mentioned is more safer, more helpful responses, right? Earlier, it relied primarily on refusal-based safety training. So based on the user's prompt, the model should either comply or refuse. Here, they've introduced a new form, safe completions. So which teaches the model to give the most helpful answer wherever possible while staying within the safety boundaries, right? So maybe partially answering the user's question or answering at a high level. If it needs to refuse, it is trained to transparently tell you why it's refusing, as well as provide safe alternatives. So they've made that system a little bit better. Now, there's also one more feature that they've mentioned here, which is the context window. So GPT-5 can handle up to 400,000 tokens, enough for entire books or sometimes huge code bases, right? And you can test it out by giving it, say, a large research paper and ask it to summarize or identify gaps or things like that. So one more thing that I did want to mention is how, over 5,000 hours of safety testing plus Microsoft's red team input made GPT-5 safer, less like sycophantic and more direct, right? And so it is able to refuse. Additionally, you've got GPT-5 Pro and other upgrades, but so far and it's available to all the users, right? GPT-5 is available to all the users, and once the usage limits are crossed, the users can be switched to a smaller model or smaller models. And yeah, so you can do a lot of things with this. There's a lot of new things that they've introduced and made GPT-5 a lot more better. And yeah, it's significantly better as instruction following, and the hallucinations are less. So ultimately, they've improved the model quite a bit. So with this, I will end this video. But yeah, thank you so much.